Hello there, my name's Brandon and I make pictures out of tiny squares. And in a recent video where I made a few spaceship designs, I created a little spacesuit version of Nano for the thumbnail image, and I thought it'd be fun to extrapolate a whole scene based on that idea of him traveling somewhere in space. And just this past week actually, I passed my 1-year anniversary of uploading videos. And one of the ones I uploaded on that first day was the Game Boy City piece featuring Nano, so it felt like a fitting moment to kind of swing back around and create another entry in that series. What I wanted to talk about today is the idea of how to fill out a scene with objects. This is something I get asked about fairly often, and whether it's like a standalone piece like this one or maybe an environment for a game, how do you know what sort of things to add that'll make that setting feel cohesive and believable? I usually start by considering what kind of story or message I want to get across in the art, and then I plan out the minimum number of set pieces required to achieve that. In this artwork, I wanted to convey that Nano has traveled to an off-world market or bazaar, so the minimum set pieces required for that narrative might just be a small spaceship on a landing platform in the background, and then a few market stalls in the foreground. So a lot of the early work here is just focusing on the composition and placement of those key set pieces, and then all the other secondary elements and supporting decoration can come later, just using whatever empty space is left over once those main set pieces are in place. There's actually a term used in game design called gray boxing, which is the approach of first blocking out a level using simple shapes to provide sort of an early test of playability and logic in the design. And then once that composition makes sense, you can come in later and skin the environment with the necessary details for that setting. And I mean, that's not exactly what I do, but it's probably the best analogy for how I approach the foundational work in a pixel art scene, which is why you'll normally see me start by making sidewalks and blank walls and structures, and of course the major set pieces that I mentioned, where I can kind of fiddle with the placement and then come in after to decorate. When thinking of the necessary details to add to these structures, we want to focus on elements that are going to support the narrative of the environment. If it helps, you can try to imagine yourself in this place, like from a first-person view maybe, and just consider what things you might expect to see while looking around, and also what the people who live there might require to function in that space. In my case, I'm trying to find things that establish an eclectic street market or a spacey or sci-fi kind of aesthetic. And for these market stalls in particular, I thought it'd be fun to have one of them selling fruit and then the one next door selling fruit juice. Like maybe for this planet there's some kind of rare or unique fruit that's their local delicacy. And so it has become kind of a staple or attraction of this location. And so in that case, it'd also be necessary that they're growing the fruit somewhere. So that led me to designing this small rooftop sprinkler kind of unit, and eventually some of the fruit underneath it. And really the best space for it in the design was up on that rooftop. But hey, maybe it's best to grow at that altitude for proper sunlight or other atmospheric kind of things. Alien fruit's different than our run-of-the-mill stuff, right? Either way, these sort of small narrative elements can have kind of a snowballing effect when working on a piece. Like you might have one idea that leads you to another, and then a lot of the decor that's created from those ideas has some intention to it rather than just being entirely random. Another example like this is the small lamppost or beacon that I'm making here. I was trying to just create a decorative star to be kind of like a friendly and spacey looking symbol, and I stumbled on a design that looked like a star topped with a heart, and I thought that was kind of cool, so that heart star became the name of the local fruit, and also just a symbol and inspiration for some of the design ideas going forward. From here, I felt that most of the elements were in place that convey my little compact story, so I'm just doing laps around the piece to kind of fill in all the empty spaces with items that'll support these narratives that we talked about. So let's do a bit of a controlled time lapse to highlight the additions to each area of the artwork and the way that they contribute to the scene. So to start, I reworked the watering system area to put in that bed of fruit underneath it. I changed the blocky building structure to just a flat wall so that I could add a couple people playing a chess game there, just to bring a bit more life into the environment. Bonus points if you're able to recognize who those travelers are. And using the leftover space, the final bits of decor are just sci-fi-esque building details and a small plant. In the landing platform area, I added a small rocket ship sign just to convey that this area was for spaceships, and then tacked on a few banners onto that wire that's going across, which I think is just kind of a pleasant look in general. I created a stripe pattern on the market stand canopies, and then added a small alien to each, who I've named Heart and Star. And my idea is that they're siblings who run competing businesses here, one of them selling fruit, the other selling fruit juice, and they'd obviously do better to pool their efforts into one business, but for some reason there's a rivalry here. In the remaining space, I've added a couple decorative rugs for more market decoration, but the rest is mostly filled out with that sci-fi decor. I wanted there to be a lot of paneling around that gave the place kind of a slightly ramshackle feel. So I hope that kind of highlights the logic behind filling out a space like this. But let's move on to coloring, because there's also a lot we can do in color selection to bring the theme together. I started shading this using a palette of 4 evenly spaced grayscale tones, which I've selected so that it provides a similar level of rendering as the Nintendo Game Boy, which is an aesthetic inspiration for this series of work. For now, I'm just trying to see in general what areas I'd like to be lighter or darker, just to kind of work out an effective contrast that helps the readability of a busy scene like this. Once the grayscale shading was in a good spot, I created 4 sets of color palettes that follow that same 4-shade distribution like the grayscale version, and then I can simply just swap out the gray tones with an equivalent colored option. If you're curious about how to make Super Game Boy palettes like this, I've got an entire video about how to do that as well. When deciding on colors for a piece, one of the simple choices we can make is to color everything as it might appear in real life, or to apply a stylized palette that kind of casts everything in a similar tone that might convey the feeling or the emotion of the piece. In this case, I've given myself these 4 palettes to work with just as potential options for mixing and matching, because my original thought was that I wanted a bright, multicolored environment that suggests the eclectic nature of the bazaar. And as much as I love the way that all these colors look together, I started to realize that the green wasn't entirely necessary, and I felt that having this many colors was just another element of busyness that provided additional distraction to an already busy scene. So in the end, I removed the green and pared down to just 7 colors. And for the color story here, the reddy pinks kind of convey the idea or imagery of the heart. The yellow covers us for the star motif, and then the blue works for that kind of cold steel of the sci-fi paneling decor. So these 3 color families are really all that's necessary for the themes going on in this piece. The final bit of polish here is just a touch of animation. I find that even adding like a really simple 2-frame idle animation like I'm making for Nano here can just bring a lot of life to a character. And this one's quite simple. I've just shifted his hands up and out while moving the body down a single pixel. For something like this, you could add more frames in between to make kind of a smoother motion, but I think the simplicity suits the aesthetic here. My favorite character animation in this piece is one of our space travelers here taking a nap while waiting for the other player to make his move. And I've created a sequence of filling in the 2x2 area of pixels for his mouth to attempt a snoring movement. Eventually I added some motion to the chest and arms as well, but this little preview here is a good example of these little rhythms that can be achieved even in a small space like 2x2 pixels. And the last example here is the banners, which I just wanted to have a slight gust of wind kind of blow them to the side a little bit. So there's not a lot of space here to avoid them overlapping each other in a weird way. So in separate frames, I shifted different portions of the banner over by just 1 pixel. So you still get a slight rippling motion, but it's occurring within a tolerance of just 1 pixel. Okay, so I think we're now ready to take a look at the final artwork. So here is the Heart Star Bazaar. Alright, I also wanted to mention that I've added this artwork as a print in my shop, and I've updated other items there as well, so if you're interested in that kind of thing, there's a link down below. Let's roll on through to CRT time to close this out. I hope this provided a few ideas for how to tackle environmental scenes, so thank you for watching, and take care and keep it square.